right, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a gentleman to you here. You know, there are very few people that have the privilege of mountain climbing and gully hopping with an 84-year-old man that has, well, he's done it all of his life practically. And he loves the mountains, and we're here in southern New Mexico. And without further ado, I just want to introduce you to Mr. E.J. Young. And we're in a very interesting place. There are petrified palm stumps and tracks that we're really giving a once-over. And I'm just going to turn this over to E.J. here and let him just tell you a little bit about his experiences in here and so forth. So, E.J., it's good to have you with us, sir.
Thank you.
And we're glad to have you with us. And if you have something to share with us, you just go right ahead.
Okay, we're in the Southern Rockies, and I've been over a great portion of it. I've been on almost every hill, up every arroyo that you can think of, and I stumbled on this particular arroyo. It's very impressive, and I wondered about it for 40 years, and this is the first time that I've been able to get any notoriety out of it whatever. So I'll thank you all and turn it back to you. So go ahead with it.
Okay, E.J., what do you think about, here for example, we can tell the way this growth is that this is a palm tree. And do you have any idea, have you heard anyone say, like in the past history of this country, about how old that would have to be, maybe?
Well, no, except I talked to one geologist that claimed that the tracks that's supposed to be in this area couldn't have happened at the time that they're supposed to be put down, but they're here. And the formation and the geology in this country would run anybody completely nuts.
I agree.
We've got more mineral, more, well, just anything, trace minerals, I'll put it that way. You can find them all in more or less this area. And lots of people spent a lot of money trying to develop them, and as far as I know, nobody's ever made any. The only time I seen the mint receipts off of a placer mine, and they had $90,000 at that time for what they'd recovered, but it cost them $125,000 to do it. So that's about all that I can come up with.
Right. Now, E.J. is a businessman, and I understand, I think on the climb up here, and I'll tell you, it's a pretty good climb, and E.J. will put some of you to shame in these mountains if you're not up in real good shape. But I heard you remark that you had sharpened some of the tool bits for some of these people that were even shooting test holes. So you've been very active for several years in this area, haven't you?
In my trade, I've been tangled up with nearly all of the explorers, prospectors, well drillers, and repaired the tools and all of them. I'm pretty well blessed with enough trades to do about anything that comes up. And I've always, no matter what, nearly anything that happens in this area, I get in on it somehow or another. And I don't know whether it's good or bad, but I kind of enjoy it.
Well, E.J., I want to shake your hand and thank you for inviting us here with you, and we'll be covering some more. We'll be looking at some tracks, some very, very interesting tracks. It's kind of going to be one of those documentaries where we're going to present it to you, and of course we're going to use some of the in-house knowledge and archaeology and so forth, and we'll be adding to this, and you're going to see E.J. again. There's many places, as he stated, he knows this country like the back of his hand. That's an old saying that we use for someone that is really well founded in an area. He's already told me about a couple, 3 places he's going to share and document some of these strange tracks. It would appear to me that from coming up, that I've seen deer tracks, I've seen petrified palm trees. Now, we're in southern New Mexico. How long has it been since you've known of palm trees growing wild in this area? Well, it hasn't been recent.
No.
Not at all. And I would say off the top of my hat, and as I say, we're just talking now. We're supposing and putting in supposition, if you would. It would have to date somewhere between 25 and 35 million years ago. And that's a guess, but that's a figure to start with until we get some people working with it, and we'll check there. And it's a very fascinating place. And again, we thank you, EJ, for bringing us here and sharing it with us.
I'm very pleased to have brought your attention to this, and I hope it does you and me and the whole country some good out of it.
Well, history always will, won't it, if a man will look at it honestly and openly. It gives us a little in-depth knowledge into what was. So, there you have it, and you've heard me say many times, rocks speak. These rocks are just crying out from the mountains. They're speaking of every kind of track, and we've got a few of these other little animals up in here that are not petrified, but they'll petrify you if you don't hear the rattler quick enough, called rattlesnakes. So we're moving along real carefully here as we continue to bring this to you. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to the editor of one of my favorite newspapers, a newspaper that enjoy documentaries every week. A little article. There's something about that was. Times past. And the editor of the Courier, in Hatch, New Mexico.
That's okay.
Right. And it is a fascinating paper. Those of you that like to keep up with what's going on in the Midwest, well, you've got it there. Gene, thank you for being with us today.
I'm really happy to be here.
It's a real pleasure having you with us, and I'd just like for you to show or speak what we got here in this rock formation. I'll just get out of your way and turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, Mr. Young, you already met, first showed me this area, and it's just found it amazing. And we have what appears to be a track with toe marks here, and we suppose that this must have been mud at one time. And you go from the toe mark slip, and then we have what might have been a hand print, and then two footprints. And the scenario possibly could have been that whatever or whomever it was slipped here, fell on his hand here, and then stepped here and here by foot. This probably will help a little. These are clearly toe marks in rock, which would have been mud earlier, a hand print or fist, then a footprint, and another footprint. In conjunction with that is a small palm tree, which is, of course, petrified. And you go beyond this, and you have the scenario, and you come up, and we have more similar marks and more palm tree areas that are very clear. I have no idea how old they are, but this must have been mud at one time or another. Whether they're man or humanoid or ape or something we don't know anything about, I have no idea. But it sure is fun to wonder and guess about it. And thank you.
All right, let's talk about the Glen Rose footprint for just a moment. As we see these amazing things with these footprints in stone, and we try to understand how this could be, then we piece together from the Word of God those thoughts, those sayings, those scripture that He has left us. I think we see here probably one of the better footprints that that we know of, even at this time, of was it a human being? Well, it looks mighty much like a human being print. And then, of course, as we're going to, you've seen before, and we're going to talk a little more about, is the finger that was petrified also, found in this same general area. And that fingerprint, we cannot deny. I have a considerable amount of medical training myself. As a matter of fact, I'm an emergency medical technician, which you have to pretty well know the anatomy. It's absolutely a finger. It is a finger. Now to say, and I would say it was a feminine finger. But there's one thing that we must always remember, is that Adam had surgery where we see, after he was made in the image of God and the angels, in the Hebrew word, the curve was taken from him. I'm not going to say any more than that about it, other than the fact that we know that perhaps we could say the more beautiful curve of the body was given to the woman. Now, I think we're all aware of that. I know all men in the world are aware of that, at least. So what I'm saying, there are still some factors that we're not familiar with, but that do exist. I still have to say that with the fact that this happened in the world age that was, it's obvious that track was more than 6,000 years old, and it was not made by an Adamic man. However, when an Adamic man eats or partakes of angels' food, as it is written in the book of Psalms, that food will sustain our body. That's what manna was angels' food. And we know from Genesis chapter 6 that angelic beings were able to impregnate woman. That's why the Geber were born, and the Adamic peoples were almost out of existence, that is to say, the people through which Christ would come. But one of those bodies, if one of those angelic beings in an angel body had stepped somewhere, if they were able to impregnate a woman, I promise you it would have left a footprint. So I find no great mystery as to how we have found footprints. And this is a very still, have we actually found footprints of man that is millions of years old? Well, they look mighty much like a man's footprint, and we're still working on it. We have to open our minds to the fact that certainly it's a possibility. But what I'm saying is, I find no problem whatsoever as a student, or as some would say, a scholar of God's Word, with the fact that there are footprints human-like, for we are made in the image of God and the angels, found that are millions of years old. In this study, and let's take a look, if we may, at that finger at this time. Now, complete with fingernail, cuticle, and this is petrified. It is stone. And beloved, listen to me. On that index joint, on observing, this is pretty difficult to carry detail down to the point that you can see with the naked eye when you actually have in hand the object. But the actual joint, you could see the socket where it was literally violently jerked off of the hand. So I cannot, in my mind, say I totally understand yet how this reached this state of petrification. And yet we would have to say, if it is, say, 35 million years old or older, that it would had to have been from the hand of someone in the first earth age. There's no ifs, ands, buts, or maybes. We have to face that fact. Now, I think there are also chemical reactions under high pressure that with certain minerals present that could expedite petrification also, perhaps. Now, I know that there would be probably some geologists that would disagree with that, be that as it. Let's go to some of the dinosaur tracks. Now, these are absolute, and there's certainly no worry whatsoever that there was an Earth age that was, because, quite frankly, in Glen Rose, Texas, these dinosaur tracks are as though the animal just walked through fresh, down to even the toes, the cleft, the whole bit. Let's look at one or two of those tracks. I really marvel when I see the magnificence of this print. Solid stone now, but right down to the three toes, the pad of the foot. You could not have, I mean, if you note where the toes went up into the murk, he must have been almost to the bank or the edge when this print was made. You could use the actual print in its petrified state, not petrified, but in this stone state. You could actually use the print to make a mold for the toes of the dinosaur. And it is an awesome thing. Yes, they were here. You do not only have to take pictures word from science and other means, but when you get out and look at the stones, they speak. And here we have this actual foot of the dinosaur that wandered the earth. Now, we have found these from Glen Rose, Texas, throughout Colorado. We know they go all the way up through Wyoming. We have mammoth bones here, even in our own museum portion here at the chapel. And you will all remember the great mammoth that we dug from the ice in Alaska. This friend of mine took part of the meat from that mammoth and fed it to his sled dogs when it came from the ice and was thawed, with the buttercups in and around in the mouth and so forth. How fantastic. There's a lot about this old earth, and there's only one way that we know for certain, and that's to get out there and find it, observe it, report it, study it, and then God's Word always, as always, has spoken the truth, has given us the facts, as long as we will dig and open our minds and allow the Holy Spirit to work through us in understanding these things of the past. Why is it so important to understand the things of the past? Well, quite simply, we see that evolution is not a fact. We see that God created things as they are. For the dinosaur that was millions of years ago was the same before he became extinct as he was the first day he came. The snails, fish, and other things that we find fossilized are exactly the same today as they were then. There has been absolutely no change whatsoever. And that's why we are documenting that God's Word is true. For not only is His Word written in the stars, but it's written in the stone left by man. What a wonderful time we have in studying our Father's Word, and the knowledge and the wisdom that the Spirit makes known through His Word. Let there be no doubt in your mind that if a scientist states that this earth, and can document it, is millions of years old, he's stating a fact. And our Father's Word does not disagree with that. Let's take some scriptures and let's educate ourselves to the knowledge that God has handily placed before us there for simply the studying. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, period. It didn't say when. It didn't say at any given point, but it is a flat statement. Then in verse 2, it states the earth became void and without form in the Hebrew. In other words, God, everything He creates perfect. but it was Satan's eruption of God's natural laws and order of events that brought about the overthrow. The overthrow of Satan. He became very powerful, as we read in Ezekiel 28. And having power even from the throne of God, when he was one of the cherubs that covereth. But no, God's word declares that this earth is millions of years old. It leaves that space open. We know that God is the creator, has always been. In Jeremiah chapter 4, beginning along with verse 18, telling his people not to be sottish, lazy, or a little stupid, that he intends to correct this earth again as he did at one time when he destroyed the first earth age. And he declares as to how he did it. He did not leave one man, not one man. So, as declared in Jeremiah chapter 4. In Noah's flood, he left several, all right, 8 to be specific of the Adamic strain, as well as other peoples, races. Some will be upset with that, let them. But our Father, always in control, our Father, as he declared through Peter in 2 Peter chapter 3, declared there will be 3 earth ages. Not 3 separate earths, but 3 specific earth ages. There was the earth age that was, and true enough, you can find in that how that our Father had a beautiful creation at one time, and as you will discover here in New Mexico, there were palm trees, tropical ferns, and you find them set in stone on top of a mountain in New Mexico, which it's been in that desert. It's been a long time since palm trees grew wild there, for these are at least a minimum of 35 million years old. With these prints, are they man's prints? Well, we've only begun to research it. But always remember this from that great book of Isaiah. And we find there in Isaiah where God says, I did not create the earth void. I created it to be inhabited. It was a perfect place. And yes, there were tropical ferns found in this mountain of New Mexico, and there were buttercups found in Alaska itself before the overthrow, before this earth was changed. Now, if you really find it interesting, we want to thank our friends there in Hatch, New Mexico, and I want to tell you about a new...
Gene Ballinger would like to make available to you the Institute magazine. You can write Gene at P.O. Box 813, Hatch, New Mexico 87937. He will make a current month copy available at $2, so you can get an idea of what's in the magazine, or you can call 505-267-4698 to contact Gene for a copy of the magazine or tours in New Mexico.
All right, let's call this installment 1, for it's only the first installment in the southern part of New Mexico, in the strange formations and the many other things that we find in this area. We want to thank the gentleman that brought us here, and E.J. Young, and editor of that great paper, The Courier, from Hatch. We'll probably be saying some more about that as we move on back to civilization. But we're going to let this wrap as we're making a latex mold here of one footprint, and we're going to be taking molds of other footprints. Many times there are things that we just can't understand for the moment. But that's all the more reason that we should investigate, that we should continue in our research. For as long as there is an unknown factor, it really doesn't hurt that we look deeper to learn facts, to learn truth. So, here you are in southern New Mexico, in an area where palm trees do not grow and haven't for millions of years, and yet you have seen those palms growing in solid rock, but in a petrified state. How interesting. We'll keep working on it. You be patient, work with us also. Once you do that, okay, God bless southern New Mexico, you are there.
We're located here at New Geneva, Pennsylvania, a historic pottery site, one that played a very important role in helping develop our country, and especially it started right here in southwestern Pennsylvania. This was a pottery site that produced a variety of stoneware, such as this type of container here, and a variety of bowls and pans made of clay. This is an example of the types of potteryware that was made and processed right here. A lot of the pieces that had broken were brought down to the river's edge and discarded. And I was very interested in this site since the early 60s, and would come down here quite often hoping to be able to find a complete pottery vessel, and it dawned on me that we were going to have to dig. So that's what some of my friends and I did. We dug in the rubble here and was very fortunate in locating some of the pottery pieces that were completely intact. And I thought, gee whiz, this is really a shame that all this educational material was going to waste. It was just lying here on a riverbank, no one using it. And I thought this would be something that surely would interest students in a classroom. So I took a variety of materials from here, and especially one of the objects like this. It's called a clay standoff. This clay standoff really got my attention because it contained not only the finger impressions but the actual fingerprints of these early pottery workers from the early 1800s. And even to further my interest, I noticed that many of the fingerprints were made by children. They had to have been made by children because they were so small. And as a young boy, when I was growing up, I could remember my parents talking about children working in coal mines back in 1876. And I thought, gee whiz, here's a situation where children were not only working in coal mines, but they were working here in a pottery factory. So then I've had the pleasure of working with approximately about 600 students down at Carmichael's Elementary here at Carmichael's, Pennsylvania, which is very close here. And Jerome Bartley and Mrs. Joy Volpe wrote a grant and submitted it to the Department of Education in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and was very fortunate in being awarded this grant. And it was a grant to bring a hands-on science program to their school, first grant that they had ever been presented with. And I thought this was really great. Here's an opportunity to really utilize the materials here at this pottery site in the classroom. And I'd like to introduce Mrs. Joy Volpe. Unfortunately, Mr. Jerome Bartley couldn't be here this evening, but Mrs. Volpe and I do team teach at her school. Joy?
Well, thank you. As Mr. Powell said, I'm a teacher at Carmichael's Area Elementary Center, and this year we started a hands-on science program that allowed the children to come from first grade up through sixth grade and have access to working with science, a lot of different areas of science, but using their hands in as many ways as possible. As Mr. Powell said, the grant was written and we were awarded it. This gave me the opportunity to bring Mr. Powell in to share his expertise, his knowledge, and all the different loves that he has with the rest of the students in our building. And I'd like to add that the children, I mean, this covers all ages and all learning abilities. We have children with learning disabilities, special ed, gifted students, your average student. This captures the attention of all the children, and they really like it. They really love it. No one misses science lab or Mr. Powell's classes.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. It's really gratifying is to have a program that really works. That is, stimulates the students to get interested in education, and the program allows them to think about possible career goals, as well as building their self-esteem. I've noticed that, and I think that works well, don't you?
Yeah, now that you ask the child what he wants to be when they grow up, there are not too many doctors, a lot of archaeologists though, a lot of paleontologists. A lot of children want to go into forensic art, into looking for artifacts and reconstructing the past.
Yeah. Well,
this is a group of our students, some of our students that we've been working with, and we've done a lot of background information with the children as far as the pottery and the different pieces. Mr. Powell's going to give them a brief review, and then maybe we can get started.
Yeah, I think that you're all anxious to get started to see if you can make a discovery, knowing that you will, because there's so many things here, and you are very familiar with a lot of them. And again, there's always that 1% that you can't identify, but we'll sure learn how to research as to find out what they are. And again, these are some of the different materials that were necessary for making good stoneware pottery. Yeah, thank you. These are called glaze testers. These played a very important role in pottery making. They would have this large kiln that was approximately 20-25 feet in diameter, 30 feet high, and they would stack the pottery inside of the kiln. And then they would shovel in salt so that the salt would vaporize and cover the surface of the pottery, therefore sealing the pottery, making it usable for holding food stuff and liquids. Because if you don't glaze or have some kind of a sealer on the freshly made pottery pieces, it will leach out, it will leak out, and therefore not serve any purpose at all. But the students, again, are quite familiar with the various types of salt glaze, and the maturity bars, which was very important, which these were used to test the melting point of the clay. Remember, as I was telling you, is that some of the pieces, well, matter of fact, right here, see one? This is a maturity bar. This is also one, because this was a time period where there weren't gauges or temperature controls, and the pottery makers had to experiment with the clay as to determine what it would do under certain heat at certain times. And that's what they would do, is to conduct tests. And these are the maturity bars. Remember them, Nick? All right. And Yeah, and the covers. These covers were made of clay, and they were placed over the top of the jug or the rim of the jug. And most of the jug-type containers have 3 scars on the shoulder part of the vessel. And that has resulted from the use of a stacking ring, and this was the process in which it was used, was that they would take a stacking ring and place it on the top of the jug, like so. And then they would take another jug and place it on the top of that inside of the pottery kiln, and they would do this until the kiln was completely filled with the pottery that had been made. Probably, maybe it took them 2 weeks to make this much pottery. And again, if they weren't paying attention to the glaze testers, it could be total destruction for the pottery. It could be just all melted, because they built a fire in the bottom of the kiln that would produce the heat to bake the clay and vaporize the salt that was shoveled into the floor of the kiln. So I guess we're all anxious to get ready, right? Okay, well, this is what we'd like for you to do, is to look at the site here and see what you can discover. And remember, unfortunately, this site's going to be underwater in about a year because of the new flood control that's been built in this area. So this is an opportunity not only to make a discovery, but to keep that discovery. This could be used for your future school projects, future reports, and it's something that you'll be able to share with someone else sometime. You ready? All right. You may go and see what you have, and if you have any questions, feel free to come over and we'll see if we can identify it. Just the same way as we do in the classroom. Okay. Yeah. I think I'll look too. Yeah, you were finding that there. You see here? Look here, honey. See how that fits on here? Like this here. Look here. This here just fits on here. And then whenever they took this off, you see that? When they pulled this stacking ring off, it left that scar on there. Isn't that neat? Isn't that neat, just by looking at and studying these type of pieces, that you can really determine a lot as to how these pieces were really used and made. Isn't it neat? All right. Yeah, that's one of the yeah. All right. See the scar? As I was saying, this is something that is going to be gone forever. And I'm going to try to come down here sometime. We'll get your dad, because I know he can dig really good, I'll bet. So, and we'll be able to really try and locate some of the pieces that are deeply buried here. Because again, this is going to be lost unless you're a scuba diver. And it can be very expensive in getting involved in scuba diving, but that's good, and I would keep that.
This is how much I found.
Too. All right. And a variety, too. You didn't pick up 3 of the same thing. That's great. Yeah, this is one of the fire bricks. This is one of the fire bricks. Yeah, this is the seal of the company that was over at Waynesburg, Pennsylvania. All right. All right. Did you see the scar on the jug, on the top of the jug? What was that object that was fit on the top of here? What kind of ring? Yeah, a collar, stacking ring. Yeah, you can take it. Do you want to keep it? Yeah, you can. You can keep it. For sure. These are all yours to keep. Yeah. This is the bottom of the jug. You notice, see how it's circular? See how circular the pattern is here? You can actually see some of the finger imprints as they worked the clay and left the fingerprints actually on there. And this is the bottom of the jug. And that's what you're looking at here. Some of these are highly glazed, salt glazed. Nick, what do you have?
I found words written in the stone.
Words written in stone. Yes. This is from the brick company that was once over at Waynesburg, Pennsylvania. Yes. That's what we do, is that we try to find these different pieces with markings on them so that we can maybe identify some of the businesses that may have been here. Maybe we'll be able to identify some that no one even knew about, just from a little piece of clay with an initial or a name on it. Yeah. This is, look here, Nick. remember this? This is the rim. This is the rim. This is the shoulder, and the body wall, and the base, and then the strap handle. Remember the ones that came off from the rim to the shoulder?
Yeah.
Remember those? Are those the older ones or the later ones?
They were the later ones.
Okay.
I get one of those. I have that part, the handle, in my box down there with Carrie.
Oh, you do? Okay. Okay. Great. That's great.
Does it like have a lid on it?
Oh, okay. This is what's called a wax sealer. You notice this inner rim? Okay, this is the wax sealer. And did you ever see anyone make jelly at home and they would pour wax over the top of the jelly to seal it?
Yeah.
Well, that's what they did here in the early 1800s, is that they used this stoneware for canning food. That was one of the most, as I mentioned, that was what was really important about this site, that it provided the stoneware for the early settlers of not only Pennsylvania, but surrounding areas as well. And they could live here for many years because they had a method of, other than drying food, but by storing it in these stoneware jars. And some of the pottery makers would design the pottery so that they could personalize it. In other words, so they'd be able to identify, say, yes, I made that. And they would pour wax in the top of this vessel, and that would seal the food stuff inside. And these were approximately 8 to 10 inches long, pretty much about the size of the jug here. And there was a variety of sizes that was made also. Isn't that neat? Okay.
Fantastic.
You have got to go say some comforting words to the little girl over there in the white pants and the striped shirt. She came over. She's crying her eyes out because they're going to flood this area.
Oh.
So we said, well, Mr. Pep will find another pottery place. He knows everything. So you got to go.
I was wondering why she was upset.
Oh, they're going to flood this place.
Honey, can I talk to you for a minute? This here pottery site, there's another one that's really close by here. It's between Point Marion and New Geneva. And so we will have a place that we can go and hunt pottery and plus keep what we find. There's lots of pottery there too. So this site isn't the only site, but it is Pennsylvania pottery. What do you think of that? So we won't have to take everything today because we have another site just right up the river from here that we can collect and learn about these early pottery makers, especially the children that worked in this pottery factory. Look at that. Look at these little fingerprints in here.
Listen to him, Joy. I'll get it.
I wonder, see if your fingerprint fits in there. You want to try that? Certainly does. All right. Okay, this is one of the chucks. This here was circular, and it had a bottom in it, and they would put these on the wheel. And when they were making the pottery, they put this on the wheel, and then they would take it off, the pottery, and this object here called a, do you remember the name of this? A chuck?
Chuck?
Yeah, called a chuck. I just wonder if it's called a chuck because of the person who maybe invented this. Maybe his name was Chuck. That's something we can look into, couldn't we? But anyhow, they would have this pottery vessel on here, and they would that had just been freshly made. They would set the chuck and a pottery vessel on a table, and they'd let it sit there until it dried, air dried. Then they would take a tool and scrape the excess clay that was attached to the vessel, because if they didn't, when they would heat it, it would be stuck there, and it could cause someone to get cut or hurt because of these sharp pieces of clay. Isn't that neat? Okay, thank you. All right. And I'd hang on to that one. That's a really good find. Okay.
What is this ring on there?
Oh, okay. This is one of the... You know, you could really even determine the actual diameter of this pottery vessel just from the circumference of the piece that you have here. But what you have is a rim, sherd meaning piece, and what we call a lug handle. This is a lug handle. Look at the glaze. This was probably made, you know, I just thought of this. This was probably made by R.T. Williams. R.T. Williams was one of the later pottery makers here at New Geneva. He also made pottery over at Greensboro, Pennsylvania. And Nick, do you want to listen to this story? Because I'd like for you to remember this, because I don't know if you were in class that day or not. But anyhow, R.T. Williams mysteriously disappeared. He went to Pittsburgh on a barge filled with pottery. And the story was that R.T. Williams had fallen overboard and drowned. Well, later on, approximately 25 years later on, there was a gentleman that returned to Greensboro, to the old home place of R.T. Williams. In the meantime, during that 25 years, R.T. Williams' wife had died, and there were 2 boys that had been left behind. Well, again, 25 years later, this gentleman stopped by the old home site. He knocked on the door, and he asked the lady that came to the door, which was one of the wife to one of the boys. And he wanted to know if they were there, and she said no. He said they were out in the field working, and she would go get them if he would like. And the elderly gentleman said no. He said, I would really like to look around in the old pottery buildings. And the young lady said, sure, go ahead. So, and a little while later, the gentleman came back, and he said, he thanked her for allowing him to look through the pottery. And many people today think that maybe this was R.T. Williams, who really didn't disappear, but this gentleman had returned home, and maybe for some reason, he left. So it's still a mystery what happened to R.T. Williams. And many of the clay standoffs, the ones that were made by adults, probably contained his actual fingerprints, his actual finger impressions. And this is, if I was going to keep something from this site, this is what I would keep. And this is rare to be able to do that, is to actually keep an artifact from a site. And then to even know the history of that artifact even makes it more meaningful, more valuable historically. Because you have something that's one of a kind, and you found it, you discovered it. Isn't that neat? Okay, yeah. Nice strap handle. This is what we call a strap handle. Hamilton and Jones, who were 2 other pottery makers here, were very famous for making these special type handles called strap handles. It's a really good find. Okay.
I think that was the same thing he found.
Yes, it is. It's just not complete.
I got another part of that. I don't know if it's the same part to it or not, but I have a part of a strap handle.
Well, are you going to see if it matches up when you get home?
If I can find it.
Okay.
Gary's doing pretty good.
All right. Yes, he is. Okay.
That's great.
This is
fantastic.
It is really exciting.
Oh, I'll tell you.
That's a really precious story, as Brenda said.
Oh, it was. Yeah, it was.
I mean, when you have that kind of concern, I mean, she is young, but the thing is that I guess, they do have feelings, and I guess they really do understand when something's going to be gone. There's a jug cover right there. See it before I pick it up?
It sure is.
You don't.
A jug cover.
A nice jug cover. This is. This has the imprint of the rim of the jug, and these were placed out here. And sometimes you can identify them just from the top because of the finger impressions.
Oh yeah.
And
that's great.
That's yours. I'd like for you to have that.
Oh, well, thank you. I'll put that in the museum as soon as I go.
You were there when I should have let you pick it up instead of me picking it up.
I think it's fascinating, the report that little girl gave, that for the fact that young people do respect history.
Yeah.
If they're given the opportunity, they do care.
Yeah.
Artifacts are going to be, well, in this case,
lost, gone forever.
And I think that it should be readily noted then that young people enjoy studying.
Yeah.
And taking an interest in our country, in our heritage, in our nation.
Yes.
In the things that have been. And when you take more pride in something, then a greater respect prehistoric dwells within that person. And I think this is a great thing that you all are doing. I really do. And I think that little girl was just a living witness to that.
Yes, she sure is. And again, it's caring. That's and knowing. Yeah. Yeah, it's really gratifying when you have. I mean, right here, who would? I mean, she is testimony to being interested and really being concerned. I mean, almost tears concerned. Yeah. And we have. I mean, how many children could get excited over broken pieces of pottery?
Yes. Where she has had the connection with the past inserted in that through your efforts, then it becomes valuable. And our past is valuable. Because,
yes, it is, tremendously.
It's been a real blessing being back out on this location.
Well, I certainly am very thankful and appreciative of you and your staff and presenting educational programs like this and exposing areas of our ancient past that normally most people would not even hear about.
Well, we're happy to do it because it's true. It's important to every citizen of this nation should have the opportunity to at least, if not visit, to know what has been, and within that I think it helps the young people plan what tomorrow will be.
Yes, I think so too. And what better level of education to start with than that is the elementary level, because this is where they are very impressionable, and this is a time to give them many areas of science to think about as a lifetime goal. As I point out to the students too, and I realize that not everyone's structured for college, and I point out that hobbies are important to families as well as going to college, but again, hobbies are very important, and it started out with me as a hobby, and that I was fortunate to move into a larger community area where there were people that had the same interests. And being a young fella, about 9 years old, I was able to get introduced to a lot of different science areas in which it's sort of, the way I look at it is paying back that early time that professionals took with me. So.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
One last thing I'd like to add here is I'd like to thank Mr. Powell for giving my students the opportunity to be exposed to this type of knowledge. And another message I'd just like to make to parents and to the public and to other teachers, that hands-on science or hands-on any type of classroom activity where you can get the children actively involved really makes a much stronger impression in a child's mind, makes it more meaningful for the child, and he can relate to it. And believe me, he'll carry it much further into his life than something that he has to read out of a book and memorize it and take a test on it. If you would see the eyes and see in the children's eyes their excitement and enthusiasm when they come into science class, and how they'll go home and bring it back a week later to show us materials or artifacts or objects that we've discussed in class, or their own interpretation of something that we've discussed, from them having the access and the ability to work with different materials, you would be amazed at how much comprehension occurs. Hands-on science is definitely the way to go in education. This year we're teaching classes from kindergarten up through 6th grade, and it's amazing how much information even a kindergarten or a first grade child can comprehend and retain. That's all. Thank you.
I want to take advantage of this opportunity to say thank you, Mr. Powell.
Thank you.
And thank you for the effort, and all teachers. There are many other teachers here today.
Yes.
And I want you to know that they care about the youth of this nation. And the little example earlier that you saw of the young girl, knowing that this heritage was going to be flooded, was in tears. If you teach a child to respect his heritage, then he will be a respected citizen. And really, what does it take? We're on a pile of broken pottery,
Yeah.
and they have learned a great deal. Their heritage is important. So I want to thank the young people that have been here this afternoon and that have been with us and that have hunted. You're precious, and it's so good to have been with you, really.
Yeah.
So, there you have it, in Pennsylvania, a small town doing a major, big job in educating our youth. And you know what? You were there.
Yeah.